Hello and welcome to Back Lot 605. I am one of your hosts. I am Casey Gelderman. Joined with me, as always, is my co-host Brian Mensing.
Sup?
And my other co-host, Sam Lentz.
What's up?
He's our squeak.
What's up, Sam? How you doing?
Good, doing good, man. Excited to be here.
Excited to continue Drac Lot 605, as we're calling it this month here.
I love it. I love it.
We're talking Dracula movies all month long. Last week we did our live podcast from SuperCon talking about 1931 Dracula. This week we're heading from Universal Dracula to Hammer Dracula with Horror of Dracula, which is probably what it's most known for, otherwise known as just simply Dracula, starring Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing from 1958. And to do so, we're going to be joined by a gentleman who joined us at SuperCon this year and was featured at the Dakota Independent Film Festival, winning Best Horror Film at that festival with Black Eyed Girl with... I think me and Brian maybe had a part to do with that. I don't know, maybe not.
Small.
I'm in an award-winning short, and I will accept it.
Yeah, there you go.
We can put it on our resume. We are joined by local filmmaker Dominic Wieneke. Dominic, welcome back.
Thanks. It's been a while.
It has been a while. It has been.
It's been too long. Him and I were discussing that. It was before we even started using this software to record our podcast.
I'll say this whole thing is kind of cool. So I'm digging it.
I was gonna say last time was it with Andy the fat dude when we did the Cursed films, or what, did we have something after that?
Oh, we did do that one, but then we did the Universal Monsters. Was that before or was that after?
I think that was before.
Maybe it was the
It's
Cursed
been too
film.
either way, it's been way too long. It has been way too long.
Yeah.
He's been kind of busy, so I'll give him that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been busy making shorts that win awards. He's been busy making 13 Fanboy. I don't know. I guess that's been there.
Busy with children.
Children, yeah. That's the biggest time suck.
Yeah, let's not forget the infants.
I was gonna say, in a way, his movies are probably children too. Come on.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, but they don't seem to need as much care. Not feed them every 3 hours.
But they still keep you up at night, right? The films?
Yes. Yeah.
I could have done this. I could have done that.
Oh, God, yeah. The times that I'm just like re-editing things in my head when I'm trying to go to sleep now. Let it go.
Sometimes you just got to say, this is when. This is why you have Zeke. Now I understand that whole thing about Zeke giving you the deadline. Just he's got to be the one to tell you just to stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I totally, everybody gives George Lucas crap for re-editing, and I totally get it because you just want to make things that much better.
Yeah.
But there comes to a point, it's like, it's this. I'm done with this project. I'm tired of seeing it.
Yeah. And I mean, my issue with George Lucas re-editing is, did he really make it better?
Right. Now the things he's tweaking are just, I think, just because he can,
Yeah. He's like, in 1979, I didn't have this technology, and now I do. So now I can make that thing in my brain actually happen.
Right.
So before we
dance number. No, thanks.
I think that's the least offensive of all of his edits in Star Wars, Sam.
Maybe.
But before we get into Dracula, let's first talk about one of those babies that we just mentioned, 13 Fanboy, because it's no secret now. It hasn't officially been announced by anyone, but unofficially, it is coming to Cedar Falls. Playing at some theater downtown that just opened in December. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But it is going to be debuting at a theater in downtown Sioux Falls very shortly. So, Dom, do you want to just throw out a quick shout out to the movie, what it is, and then maybe where we can watch it, and maybe where we officially can watch it that same day as well.
Sure. Well, 13 Fanboy is basically, it's a labor of love on the part of Deborah Voorhees, who she thankfully included me in this because it's been awesome to see this grow from a grassroots thing. I mean, she built up her Facebook group and then rolled the project out little by little. It's been like indie filmmaking at its core. The whole concept is a stalker is stalking and killing the actors from the original Friday franchise. So she got Dee Wallace, who was not from the Friday franchise, but it was originally supposed to be for Adrian King, but Adrian bowed out. So they got Dee Wallace instead, who I think was a phenomenal replacement. I got Kane Hodder, Jennifer Banco, Lara Park Lincoln, Tracy Savage, Corey Feldman, Ron Sloan, Judy Aronson, Carol Locate makes an appearance. So basically all the alumni from Friday the 13th that are I classify as the royalty. So yeah, it does finally come out after a long delay. We shot it. We finished January of 2020 because then everything went to hell after that. Actually was going to hell while we were shooting, and then once we got home, it's like, oh, it's really bad. So that's why it's finally getting a theatrical release on October 22nd. It will be playing at the State Theater on the 22nd and 23rd. She's got showings around the country. Those mostly indie theaters because they decided to go the indie route, trying to get it in every theater they possibly could by themselves. Saves money that way. It will also be on VOD that day on pretty much everything, iTunes, Vudu, everything. But my recommendation is see it in the theaters because it was designed for the theaters. Everything is it's big, it's bloody, it's suspenseful. It's not like the Friday franchise. Very much her influences were Cape Fear and Hush. So if you go in knowing that, you're going to see a lot of Cape Fear
Elements.
Thank you. Perfect word. So it's not going to be the typical Friday. People won't be making stupid decisions. It's very much an intellectual horror film. So it's going to be great to see everybody's reactions to it. So, but yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I can't wait. I know. I mean, we'll be at the State for that for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fully expecting with that Cape Fear reference that Dom, you are riding underneath a car at some point in this movie. We may not see you, but you might be underneath a car.
Yeah. Probably for most everything. I do appear in there 3 times. I should have been 4, but they cut one of my scenes, which had nothing to do with me. After you see it, I'll tell you what was cut out. But yeah, it's very much, there's a convention sequence. You'll see me full on. And then I appear right behind Corey Feldman's shoulder most of the time. And then there's another scene where I'm in the background if you know where to look. And then the third time I appear, I don't think anybody will ever know because it's just my hand. So. But it's a very pivotal part in that scene. So
that's awesome.
But, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to check it out at the State Theater. That's awesome that we're getting it in Sioux Falls too. Mm-hmm. Again, unofficially at the State Theater, but officially it will be at the State Theater.
It's going to be fun to finally tell people about all the stuff that I got to experience and actually be able to give you spoilers or after you see it. So we'll have a good discussion afterwards.
He's talking spoilers. I'm running out the room.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's jump into this week's episode. Then we're jumping into Horror of Dracula, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. As I said, we're jumping into our second film on our Dracula movie series, and I'm going to throw it off right away back to our guest Dom. Do you remember the first time you watched Horror of Dracula? Is Hammer horror like something you grew up with, or is it something you jumped into later?
I was familiar with it. But I can honestly say that I think probably the only Hammer film I had seen or remember seeing was Curse of the Werewolf. But I had thought for some reason I had seen this Dracula, but when I'm rewatching it, nothing came back. But I think it's one of those movies I'd seen a lot of clips from. That it's been played on enough shows that I think I thought I saw it. It is very much a loose interpretation of the original story. I kind of equated it to the screenwriter. He like read the story, forgot about it, and then decided to tell somebody about it 3 months later and got things totally wrong. But yeah,
Dracula's version of telephone.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. Because for some reason I was thinking it was 68, but then I'm like, the opening credits came up as 58, and I'm like, oh wow, that's a lot older than I thought it was. So it's not actually that far away from Universal at that point. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, throwing it off. I think Sam, this is your first time watching it too, and Brian, this is your
Yep.
first time as
Yep.
as well. What were your guys' expectations? I don't know if you guys have seen any Hammer films. I'm not sure.
So I've definitely seen Hammer horror films. I've even seen some Christopher Lee Dracula flicks. I can't remember which one it was, but there was one that I was kind of obsessed with that was on a DVD compilation that was like 21 movies that were kind of just like public domain or cheap to like release or whatever. And it started with like a satanic ritual, which is why I liked it so much, because like that stuff was so interesting to me. So like
Now I
knew
understand you, Sam.
of Dracula and Christopher Lee's version. I just hadn't made it back to like his original thing. And then Peter Cushing being Van Helsing, I slightly remember him. And there were certain elements of this movie that I kind of remembered, but most of it was brand new to me. But there were a few certain scenes where I'm like, I feel like I've seen this maybe like on television or something. But yeah, this would have been the first time I watched the whole way through, and I dig this movie, but I also am like a sucker for vampires and Dracula in particular. So yeah.
Yeah, you don't have an infatuation with Lost Boys at all.
Yeah, no, not at all.
No, and for me it was my first time viewing. Thankfully, HBO has this on streaming and whatnot to give me the opportunity. For the sake of Hammer films, honestly, I don't know. Probably not. More than likely, probably not. Because there really is not a lot of those old school horror movies that I've really ever gotten to sit down and watch. I'm glad I was able to. I mean, you're talking about some very iconic people in this movie, that to the point where you're like, you just want to sit and watch this and enjoy this just because of who was in it. Because I mean, you don't get, I mean, especially for the sake of, Star Wars and Cushing and, Christopher Lee and everything he's done before and since and everything like that. I looked forward to just seeing this just because of those two, to begin with.
Yeah, I was going to say the first time I watched it was courtesy of Last Stop. They had a copy of Horror of Dracula for like $4 on DVD, and I just randomly picked it up and popped it in. Absolutely, just fell in love with Lee's interpretation of the character, and especially Peter Cushing's Van Helsing. I think he's just and I think he's kind of the reason that this movie sticks out to me in a way, because like Dom said, this is a loose adaptation of the Bram Stoker original story. Definitely emphasis on the director/writer read Bram Stoker's Dracula and was like, yeah, Van Helsing's the coolest part. Let's just have him just go up against Dracula this entire movie. We're going to throw
Jonathan
the actual
Harker be an assistant.
and in 15 minutes of this movie,
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, that's why I think it's so interesting that we're covering 4 very different Dracula movies this month, is to see the differences of who, obviously Dracula is the center point of any of these movies, but who is the side character of all these, who's going to show up the most. And I mean, Jonathan Harker he's a plot point more than a character in this one. And I find that very interesting, that this is kind of our big adaptation of Dracula versus Van Helsing, instead of like the love story really aspect of that we get like with Bram Stoker's Dracula with Coppola or Lugosi doing kind of this mesmerizing Dracula that he was playing. But I don't know, Lee is just Christopher Lee is so good in this movie. Yeah, for this movie being in 1958, it doesn't hold a lot back. It does not hold a lot back for a 1958 movie.
So
His
real,
full-on reveal is like actually terrifying, even today. Like the fangs bared, blood dripping, eyes wide, and the way he just like literally jumps over the table as he runs to like grab his bride. It's like, oh my god! Like,
So quick question here for you, because I started thinking about this about halfway through the film. Does Christopher Lee have any dialogue?
very
Because
very little dialogue, but he
I was
does
saying,
have
because
some. Yeah.
it must be like towards at the very, very very beginning of it, because as we progress through the film, I'm sitting here going, everything is on the emphasis of his body language and his persona on film to the point where he doesn't need any dialogue to bring so much life to this character.
I thought I had read that he's actually only on screen for like 8 minutes. You know, it's one of those. It's a really short time.
Yeah.
The question is, did he make as much money as De Niro doing Frankenstein for the short amount of time he was on that movie?
Probably not.
Did he make as much money combined on all the times he played Dracula as De Niro did?
As De Niro does for Frankenstein?
But like most of his dialogue it's very dialogue heavy for him with Jonathan Harker. And then after that, it's like pure atmospheric, mysterious Dracula after that, which is also kind of interesting because most Dracula movies is like the build up to Dracula. He's very mysterious in the beginning, and then you get kind of full on Dracula. This is kind of the opposite. Like you start off the movie at Dracula's castle. He's just kind of a normal guy looking for a librarian. And then you get to the scene that Sam's talking about where he jumps across the table with a bloody mouth, and you're like, all right, this guy is very creepy. And then you get that throughout the rest of the movie. He's kind of hidden throughout the movie, doesn't show up a whole lot. But when he does, it's damn impactful.
He holds the scene.
I mean, he's largely absent for the entire second act of this movie. The second act of this movie is essentially them trying to figure out what the hell is happening to, Lucy and, and I think that's where like Peter could, like, if they would have had anybody else playing Van Helsing, this movie would not be very good, because it's very much it's the definitive Van Helsing movie, at least until 2004, right, Casey?
Dare I ask which one is in 2004?
Oh yeah,
Casey's
Van
favorite
Helsing,
movie,
yeah.
Van
The
Helsing.
horrible movie Van Helsing.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I should have brought my copy with me here just so that we can bask in its glory.
That was such a missed opportunity, but
yeah,
just a little bit.
Would have been much better if we just had this Van Helsing. For me, this is Van Helsing. Like Peter Cushing for me is like my definitive version of the character because he is kind of this very smart, intellectual, understands the mythos of vampires, also does the research he needs to, and is also a badass in this movie. Like we talk about Christopher Lee jumping across tables. By the end of this movie, like Peter Cushing's like jumping over staircases to climb up the steps. Like he's doing just as much as an actor to portray his character's athleticism or the sense of like urgency that his character needs at that point.
Yeah, he's like pole vaulting over tables at the end of it to stop Drac, and it's like, this is the Van Helsing movie we all want.
Back then they didn't worry about safeties and standards, and if you twist an ankle or break something, they didn't care.
Yeah. Were these guys never not middle-aged though? Like seriously.
Yeah, I did, because I'm fascinated with looking up actors at what age they're playing these characters. He was like 46 when he was doing that role. But I thought it was really badass with the two candlesticks at the end. I mean, that was just like, that totally had me like, I'm sold now.
And for me, it's kind of nice just being able to see somebody like, Cushing doing something, because I look at him and I immediately I think of Star Wars. That's just immediately where my brain goes. And it's just nice to be able to be like, all right, he did do things before that. Granted, we have to go almost 20 years back to get there. But it was nice to see him getting all badass in this.
Yeah, I was
with Peter Cushing. For me, I always go back to Tales from the Crypt, the original movie from '72, because he played the old man next door, and that's there again. That's something to look into. That's such a sad story because he had just lost his wife like a month before, and now he's playing this lonely old hermit, and you could just feel that come through in his performance, you know. So that's
I've not seen that. I will have to check it out.
Oh, it's that one and the Vault of Horror are both. I mean, they're very dated. They're early 70s, but they're still pretty decent.
Yeah, I love classic horror though. Like stuff like this is right up my alley. I love I mean, these sets in this movie are so gorgeous. Like even the opening credits over all the shots of like the stone statues and everything. Like you just get to see Castle Dracula.
And then the blood dropping on the name.
Yeah. It's just I don't know. Yeah, like they're definitely dated for sure, but like there's nothing I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, like the 1958 Blob is very dated, and it's one of my favorite movies ever. I love it. You know, like it's fantastic.
But you know,
it's such a simpler time.
Yeah.
Even though it's dated, like you know, Dom makes reference to like the blood splatter at the very beginning of the movie and whatnot. You figure if they would do that today, that's 100% CGI. Like that never physically took place and whatnot. Yet, you know, you figure when they're just doing just that opening part of that sequence and whatnot, they're meticulously going and they're dropping that because they, you know, and if they didn't get the shot just right, you know, they wiped and repeat kind of thing. Like there was just as much, you know, opportunity to make sure that was right, you know, perfect for them as much as the rest of the film was. You know, and sometimes we, you know, I think we've lost a little bit of that because of the, you know, the ease of what we can do nowadays. Oh, just give it to the CGI artist. He can get it cranked out in 5 minutes. Right. You know, there isn't that finesse like what we got, you know, in this, even just in that little bit of like, 15 seconds.
I was gonna say that's what really impresses me the most about this movie, because when you think of horror movies from the 50s, you think of like The Blob, like Sam said. You think of the creature features of this time, but then you have Hammer pumping out this, where it looks like it's something straight out of the late 70s, early 80s, and you're like, yeah, they were 15, 20 years ahead of their time with everything that they were doing, the storytelling, the kind of, I wouldn't even call it's not sleazy, this movie, but it is very like progressive in the way it is presenting its blood and its gore and the women in this movie, especially the way that they dress. Like even once you get to the end of the movie, the final demise of Dracula, I'm like, yeah, that looks like something out of straight out of a 70s, 80s horror movie. Like just the way it's shot, the way they use the practical effects there. And it's just so impressive that this is, you know, way ahead of its time. And I again, the part that Dom mentioned earlier with the crucifix and how that's used, I think throughout this movie, how they use the crucifix is really impressive, especially the gore that it's used. Like when Van Helsing first uses it and just presses it against her head, and it just sears this mark on her forehead. It's like, oh, that's disgusting. And when it shows up in the hand, like the crucifix is in the hand and leaves the burn mark there, it's like that's just so damn good. It's so effective.
The funny thing that I found with that scene where he puts the cross on her forehead and it burns in, my knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, hey, Fright Night did that. I'm like, no, this did that and Fright Night copied it. Like,
yep.
Like, you know, seeing Fright Night first, it was just that like weird disconnect, you know?
The disintegration at the end was actually quite shocking for that time. Did you happen to look at there's actually a deleted shot out of that section?
No.
Where he grabs Christopher Lee grabs his face and like pulls and it like leaves like these red trails as he's disintegrating. They had to cut that out, but it is on YouTube, so check it out.
Oh my God,
literally like a 2-second shot, but it just adds more gratuitous just violence to it. It was really interesting. So
yeah, I mean, I look at that last shot, you know, and you look at comparative to like today's standards and whatnot, and it's very, very dated. But I do think that the way that they were cutting back and forth to kind of make up for that, to kind of show the degradation, I think was great. Granted, it almost looked like his eyeballs were metal by the time we got to that part of it here, but I mean, at that point I was just chuckling, but I did like how they were able to pull that off. You know, again, with the age of this movie and whatnot, you know, they didn't have, you know, again, the CGI to be like, here, give him 5 minutes and whatnot. No, we actually have to put some work into making this look like he's honestly turning to ash, and I love that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got like there are some great practical effects in this. I mean, I think when they vamp out, it's like it's genuinely, I mean, obviously we've taken it further in movies like Fright Night where like the face gets really grotesque. Like 30 Days of Night, all that kind of stuff. But like sometimes like more like the more simple design is more effective. Like to me, it's almost scarier to just see Christopher Lee with some vampire fangs, some blood, and like a little bit of red contacts. Like it's like, oh damn, like that's scarier than Chris Sarandon looking up and having like a full on prosthetic on his face. And both movies are like, I'm not trying to bash on Fright Night. That's also one of my favorite movies. I love it. But yeah, it's interesting how it sometimes like the simplicity of these older movies is actually where they find their strength. It allows the actors to really do it.
I believe this one was like the first Dracula film to introduce the red eyes and the blood on the fangs. And from what I love trivia, so I looked at the trivia on this one, and like I guess Christopher Lee could not see with those contact lenses. So like the first time when he jumps over the table and comes at picks up his bride, apparently he totally missed her and like ran into the camera. So
oh no. That's a dangerous stunt to be pulling blind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also the 1950s. They don't exactly have little plastic, little silicone-like contacts like we've got today. I imagine these are glass saucers in his eyes that are. I've watched the Brady Bunch. I saw what those contacts used to look like and whatnot. And you know what? His eyes were probably red from just wearing the contacts, not because the contacts were actually colored.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have just put the contacts in for about 5 minutes, taken them out, and they would have had the same effect.
Exactly.
The thing that struck me odd too is like, do none of these caskets have lids? Are they all just open? Yeah, they're like laying in the crypt and they're all open caskets. So, but I get it. It was it was that time. It was done relatively inexpensive at that point, which I thought was pretty phenomenal for the set that what they had. Looking at it, and they shot it in Britain, so I don't know what the pound conversion is, but they didn't spend a whole lot on it.
Yeah,
you could have spent like $5 more to get the wood to make those lids.
Yeah.
I was gonna say one of my favorite shots involves the lid. Though the maybe one lid we get in this movie is the hand just coming out of it and it's sliding over. Yeah, like it's such a great shot. And I think the reason this movie works on a simplicity level is because you have like Cushing and Lee and Alfred Pennyworth. That's his name, right? That's he doesn't have an actor's name. It's just Alfred.
His name is Michael Gould or Michael or whatever.
Michael Goff, I want to say.
Goff, like, there you go. Yeah.
There you go.
And I it's so funny because I was like, I read the name in the opening credits, and I got him confused with Michael Gambon, who played Dumbledore in the Harry Potter movies. So the whole time I'm like, God, he doesn't look like Dumbledore at all. Like, how did he grow up to do this? And then like after I'd watched the movie about 2 hours later, it clicked. I'm like, you idiot! It was Alfred. Like, duh, he did look like Alfred. Like,
yeah, he totally looks like Alfred.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Sam. I had it this time too, because the first time I watched him, like, God, that guy just looks really familiar, and I have no idea what he's from. And then I watched it this time, and like 15 minutes after he shows up, I'm like, oh my God, it's Alfred.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, like and that's what I appreciated about watching this. Granted, I knew going into this because I actually pulled up the cast list beforehand, and the most recent photo of him was an image from Batman. So I was excited already going into it. But I'm like, again, the fact that for me, somebody who's played an iconic character, like nothing to take away from Jeremy Irons or anybody else who has played Alfred or will play Alfred, but he's played an iconic version of Alfred to the point where, like, I saw him in this and I was excited to watch him in this and see what he did that was not Alfred.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, like, he's the only one that comes back for all 4 of those movies. So, like, there's a reason that he, like, when you think Alfred, he's usually the
Yeah.
name and the face that you come up with, you know. I was just like, I was so beside myself about 2 hours later when I was like, it finally clicked with me. I'm like, oh my god, like, yeah, it was cool to see him in something different because I don't think I've seen him in anything besides the Batman movies, and he was good in
Sleepy
this.
Hollow. He was
Oh,
in Tim Burton's
yeah.
Sleepy Hollow. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so
Yeah.
I have seen him in at least one thing, multiple times,
Because Sleepy Hollow.
because Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, I was just genuinely like kind of caught off guard by how progressive this movie was for 58. You know, it definitely, you talk about like Psycho and how it was the first scene with like a man and a woman in a bed together, like in lingerie and all that, like, and that's 2 years after this. But I'd argue that some of the stuff in this way surpasses what Psycho did. And I mean, Psycho's a classic. Psycho's a modern masterpiece. But I mean, some of the stuff in here was genuinely kind of like, I mean, like I said, the scene where you first see Christopher Lee vamp out, like, it got me. It got under my skin. And I'm just like, imagine seeing this in a theater in 1958. Like, I might have audibly screamed had I been in a theater at that time, not knowing what I was walking into, you know? Like, dang. It was just, I don't know. That's the cool thing about these movies.
One thing that, again, like, really stands out, again, we talked about like how Van Helsing is basically the main character of this one, and how Michael, is it Goff?
I think it's Goff.
And how his character is such a minor character when you think of Dracula lore, and yet he's there basically till the end of this movie, and it's like, but why? Well, why is he there? And I think it's at least interesting to take these liberties with the Dracula storyline and tell this type of story, because unfortunately, I think the ladies do get sidelined a little. Well, a lot of it, I think, in this movie.
Yeah.
They aren't given a whole lot to do besides being damsels in distress for Van Helsing to slay them. He doesn't save anyone in this movie. He just murders people like left and right.
Worst superhero ever.
Because both Lucy and Mina both die, right? Yeah, and he tries to save for both of them. Yeah.
No, well, Mina gets saved because she's the one who gets buried at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of threw me off too. Is she comes out of the dirt and her dress is still super clean, and you know.
They couldn't get the dress dirty back then. They only had one.
They shot that scene first.
Right.
They rented the dress. They had to return it.
Do you know how much that deposit was?
But like, that's why like, again, when I watch other Dracula movies though, like Jonathan Harker, I usually don't care about Jonathan Harker. Like, even last week we talked about Jonathan Harker's very small in 1931 Dracula.
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of another character, the love interest by the end of the movie. Like, they give his basically his role of meeting Dracula to Dwight Fry's character in that one, and then this one he's killed off like right away. He actually gets to, like, he's writing the memoirs of visiting Dracula and being the librarian and stuff there, but he's killed off 15 minutes into this movie, if that. And
those written memoirs are where the similarities to the book begin and end.
Yeah.
That's it.
As somebody who's tried to read that book and realized it's not written like a conventional book, it's probably where he's probably like, where can I get the Cliff Notes version of this? And so he only pick and choose what he wanted out of that book, because anybody who's, again, that has looked at that book realized it is not exactly the most easiest thing to read.
Yeah, right. It's an interesting read and kind of ahead of its time, because it was very, like, it's all told through letters and journal entries, and it's just kind of interesting to hear some of that used in this movie, and then for it to essentially minutes later throw that out the window for more of like an action heavy kind of plot. And one thing that I noticed going into it, I was like, oh man, there's going to be no Renfield. And to me, like, Renfield is the best character in the 1931 Dracula. Like, I love Renfield and I love Dwight Frye in that. And so I was a little disappointed at first. I was like, oh man, there's not going to be a Renfield. Like, is this movie going to work for me? And it did. And I think it's largely because Peter Cushing just freaking nails it.
Literally.
He's that good. Yeah, literally. So.
And yeah, and again, that's why I was very interested to cover 4 different Draculas, because I think Renfield is it's probably the most present in the 31 one, or it's at least the version of Renfield you remember the most. This is, for me, this is the version of Van Helsing I remember the most.
Renfield is also frequently used in Dracula Dead and Loving It.
We will not be covering Dracula Loving It.
Oh,
Sam.
man.
But I am legally obligated to bring that movie up on every episode this month. So.
He had a case. He's like, I'm going to do Dracula all month, but we got to be all serious ones. We can't do anything weird and obnoxious like Dead and Loving It or Dracula 2000.
I don't want to do Dracula 2000.
No. I'd rather do Dracula Untold.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet, but I actually do want to watch that because I have a feeling that I'd kind of love it.
Would like that for Luke Evans.
For Luke Evans, and just the fact that, like, as bad as some of these like new Universal monster movies are, like Tom Cruise's The Mummy, I do have like a sick twisted pleasure in watching them because they're so like it's a train wreck, and I just love watching it.
Dracula Untold is much better than Tom Cruise's The Mummy or Van Helsing.
Okay.
Wow.
I'll take it.
I'm not saying much better, but it is a better. I think it's a better movie.
You mean it's
Tom
Cruise Mummy that tries to be an American werewolf in London, and also a backdoor Jekyll and Hyde pilot, and also Tom Cruise is playing a man like a third his age.
Man? Yeah,
right.
You mean it's better than that movie?
It is, Sam. Surprisingly, it is. But back to this movie though. We're not talking about Tom Cruise's The Mummy. We'll save Tom Cruise's The Mummy for the Mummy month that we'll never do.
For Tom Cruise month.
Or Tom Cruise month, because of all the Tom Cruise movies we can fit into a month, we're obviously doing The Mummy.
Yes.
But back to this movie again. I think this is one of the most standout Draculas too. When you think of Dracula, you think of Bela Lugosi is usually who I go to, or you can go to Gary Oldman's version of Dracula. But Christopher Lee just has. I could see in another movie if he was in the 1931 one, or even in Coppola's version. I'm like, I could see him playing both because he has this kind of mesmerizing presence about him, like Lugosi, and he does kind of have this suave sexiness to him, more than Gary Oldman. Let's be honest, he has it more than Gary Oldman in that movie.
Have you seen Gary Oldman in the waistcoat? No, Gary Oldman
in that that little facial hair that he has going on.
The long hair and the top hat. No, Gary Oldman knows how to get it in that movie. All right.
Yes.
Sure, he does. But but just imagine Christopher Lee just walking in the scene. He's just got blood dripping from his mouth, and you're like, all right, I get it. Why not end up with him?
Yeah.
Well, and the best thing is based on, even the age of him now versus then versus 31 or whatever the case is, if he would have been presented the opportunity for Coppola's, he still would have been able to pull it off too. I genuinely think.
Well, his role in Star Wars was literally Dracula with a lightsaber. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
He was very good in those. He was one of the best parts of the prequels. So,
do you think his buddy Cushing is eventually you need to make a Star Wars movie?
You know what? I would bet you that part of the reason he took it is because of Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
Because didn't Cushing die in 2000? I think I think Cushing might have passed away before he took it, or at least
Peter
right
Cushing
no.
died
around
in
the time.
he died in 1994.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say
So,
it was
yeah.
pretty early. Yeah.
It was. Okay. So yeah, I guarantee you that part of it was just like, hey, my really good friend did these movies years ago. I would like to be a part of it too, you know? Like
Yeah.
I could see
Also-
that being a major factor.
Old Christopher Lee is a badass, just doing like Lord of the Rings, starting a death metal band, and playing Count Dooku.
Yeah.
And I guess Willy Wonka's dad and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory too. But
Which he's surprisingly really good at that. I like, not surprisingly, but like the movie itself, when it takes that weird detour, he makes it watchable, you know? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, like, you know, not to get off topic, but I mean, for the sake of Willy Wonka, you know, it's a weird movie and whatnot, but you know, that at least if we're gonna have a playback to his early years, at least we've got somebody like Christopher Lee who's gonna be able to own every second he's on that screen.
mhm.
To the point where like you kind of feel bad for Willy Wonka because you realize how much of a dirtbag his father was as that dentist.
Mm.
Nah, I don't feel bad for that Willy Wonka. He's a dirtbag himself.
Cavities on a stick.
You're just waiting for Timothy Chalamet's version just to just admit it.
Did you watch any of the sequels to these Draculas? Because I didn't realize that there was 8 sequels after this one.
8? No.
Which
Like I said,
has Cushing
saw-
is in some and Lee's in others. So
Yeah. And I've seen, like I said, I can't remember what it is. It might be like the Curse of Dracula or the Cult of Dracula. There's one of them that I saw.
I think it
With
might
the
be the
same-
Satanic Rites Dracula, which was
Yeah, that's the one.
Something. Okay.
Yep.
The DVD I have has 4, and I thought it was all of them. And then I was like doing the research. I was like, holy crap! There's a total of 8, and like Brides of Dracula is the next one, which Cushing reprises Van Helsing, but Lee is not in it. But they all pick up after one another. Like every time he's turned to dust, they figure out ways to bring him back. You know.
Nice. So he's the original like slasher villain.
Yeah.
He just keeps coming back.
Although the last 2 I'm interested in seeing, like, was it Dracula 72, because then they put them in current day, which at that point would have been 70s. But so
I like that.
I'm
That's
really
cool.
interested in looking at all these now again. So.
Yeah.
1970s Dracula with the pimp jacket on.
Exactly.
That's one thing that I've really liked about this month, though, is like watching these different iterations of Dracula, and we're literally watching like the first in each of these series. But I'm really interested in diving into like some of the lesser known ones and the sequels and things like that, because it's just, yeah, there's so much Dracula. There's so many Dracula movies. I still have to finish. I watched the first episode of the Netflix limited series that happened a few years back, and I liked the first episode. I don't know why I didn't continue with it. So like
same thing. I watched the first one, and it ends up kind of on a cliffhanger, and I just never got back to it.
Yeah.
What show?
and it's
What
so
show is
weird.
this?
It's the Dracula mini series with like, I think it's like Place Bang plays Dracula.
Yeah.
I think it came out in
And,
2019.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just like three episodes, but they're like an hour and a half each. And I watched the first one, and like, yeah, like Dom said, it ended on a cliffhanger, but for some reason I just never went back to it. And like watching these now, I'm like, I really need to go back and revisit that, because I loved the first episode. So
Well, I think up until this point, this is only the 3rd version of Dracula, because you had Lugosi, and then John Carradine was in one of them, and then now it was Lee. But I mean, if you count Max Schreck going back to Nosferatu, then that's 4. But
right.
Is Lon Chaney in there, or is he after? No, he's before this.
I think he came afterwards. I found
this
this really great article that broke them down into the eras on when they did them, and Christopher Lee and I think Lon Chaney kind of bounced back and forth. So
I don't love Chaney's Dracula. I don't buy him as Dracula. but like horror, like Hammer horror is kind of a big blind spot in horror movies, period, for me, because this is, off the top of my head, this is the only Hammer movie that I've ever seen, and this is the only Christopher Lee Dracula that I've ever seen. I own Curse of Frankenstein. I should probably just watch that at some point, because I have heard nothing but great things about that. And again, like so many of these movies of this time star Lee and Cushing, and I love both of them in this world of the horror movies that they're putting on during the 50s and 60s. But yeah, like this makes me want to just deep dive into all these, and like Sam said, figure out how Christopher Lee is like the OG Jason Voorhees of how he comes back each time. Like, does he get a lightning rod stabbed into him at some point? Does that happen? I want to know. Does he go to Manhattan in one of these? I'm hoping that he does. Maybe in the 70s one.
Tommy needs to understand that he got a lot of people killed because he would just not leave dead alone.
Sometimes that is better.
I think instead of going to Manhattan, he goes to Piccadilly Circus, isn't it?
I would just like to point out, for the sake that I am the minority here when it comes to the horror aspects of film and whatnot between all three of you, and the fact that hearing you're like all these different ones that you had not watched or ever experienced it, I'm kind of disappointed in you and Sam and Casey.
Everybody's got their blind spots. This is one of them.
Blind spots, and
I totally admit this is for me too, and I just don't know why. Because I mean, like I saw Curse of the Werewolf years ago, which ironically was the only Hammer horror werewolf film that they did.
Really,
they did a lot with the Mummy and Dracula and Frankenstein. So.
See, and I've seen the Mummy. I have the Mummy on Vudu. I picked it up on a one of those $5 weekend sales or whatever, and it's fun. It's got that one also features both Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and it's good. I think it's worth a watch. It's definitely when I started Horror of Dracula, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. This is definitely that Hammer horror vibe that I got from the Mummy. Nice. And so yeah, I'd recommend the Mummy for sure.
Maybe Hammer's issue was, with Dracula it's really easy to paint your guy white and give him pointy teeth. Frankenstein it's really easy to paint him green and give him little bullets in his sides. Mummy, all you gotta do is just wrap your guy in toilet paper, you're good. The werewolf, they're like, you know what, this whole making fur kind of thing is, I'm not gonna do it. So let's go work on the other guys.
Invisible Man movie, because you don't even have to have a guy for that one.
I was just about to say that one got lost. They couldn't find it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, for some reason, why is it the werewolf always gets the short, the short end of the stick? Like Universal, you think about it, Wolfman technically has one movie, and then he meets everybody else after that. He gets to go hang out with the other monsters. He only gets one movie by himself.
I got kicked in the nards.
There's not much to do with a werewolf character, though. I mean, unless you look at the Halloween franchise, they're up to part 8 or whatever. But still, there's not a whole lot you can do. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Dracula, you can actually have him interact with people. Whereas with a werewolf, it's just like, ooh, I bite you, and I'm going to go away.
Yeah.
Well, and the Wolfman works so well as just a standalone tragedy that it's honestly, sequels might almost cheapen that movie in a sense, because it ends on such a, and I know most of these do end on a tragic note. You got Frankenstein dies at the end of literally every movie he's in, but with the Wolfman, it's kind of especially that 1941 film, it's so heartbreaking that it's kind of man, Larry Talbot's story is over, and I'm devastated. And bringing him back for a sequel, I know he did the Meat ones, but he never had a total sequel of his own. And I think that was the smart move, honestly.
And actually, what they do with him, and I know we're way off topic now, but what they do with him in those is he's the hero of the story. Lon Chaney Jr. is the star of the movie. Larry Talbot is the protagonist. You're watching him trying to stop, Dracula, trying to stop Frankenstein's monster in those movies. He's the character you're rooting for in those, which is probably the best way you can go about doing the Wolfman in sequels. I guess you have to make him a hero at some point, because he doesn't have a Van Helsing, he doesn't have a Dr. Frankenstein, he doesn't have, I don't know, explorers.
He has that gypsy woman, Maleva. I don't know if that counts, but
all right. Anyway, let's get back to this movie here, guys. Let's kind of jump into our final thoughts movie. I think all of us are ready to recommend it. All of us are willing to watch the sequels. So I will throw it off to Sam first. What's your final thoughts on Horror of Dracula?
My final thoughts with this movie is kind of a genuine banger. Like I really love this. I love this era of horror. So I really dig it. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, they absolutely crush these roles. And I'm looking forward to digging into the sequels. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5, but it could go up on rewatches, to be honest. You know, little nitpicky stuff here and there, but overall, it's a really solid movie. It's a really solid movie. So yeah, I dig it. I highly recommend Horror of Dracula.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I was going into this month going, we're gonna have a lot of Dracula. It's gonna be a long month. But no, I agree. So far, like this movie isn't anything to what I experienced from the 31 version and whatnot. Different person, Christopher Lee is crushing it as Dracula. It does make me kind of want to go see the other iterations of Dracula that he's done, because I think he does a phenomenal job in it. I mean, Peter Cushing is Peter Cushing. I mean, that's just is. Overall, I'm with Sam. I gave it 3.5 as well and whatnot. And I think part of it is that maybe if I had seen this movie back, if I was born, alive in 1958, it probably would have been higher up, because, my brain's still wired for what I experience in movies today and whatnot. Some of the stuff for me just doesn't age as well, but I still appreciate everything that went into a movie because of when it was made.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think part of it is I felt a little bored at the beginning, but I think it was because I've seen this story many times. But you kind of strip that away and realize, focus on what they're telling you at this point. Yeah, then I was thoroughly enjoying it, and I definitely want to check out the sequels. And oddly enough, I also gave it 3.5 out of 5, just because, I thought some of the things were a little cheesy, but there again, looking at the time frame, I always kind of put things into that context. I thought it was enjoyable. Definitely, I was. That that last couple minutes when he grabs those candlesticks, man, I was all on. Like, this is great. So
yeah, that's the thing that's never been played off ever since then.
Yeah, I'm right in that same rating for you guys. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I love this movie. I love Cushing. I love Christopher Lee. Again, this is my favorite version of Van Helsing. I think it's the best version. It's the fully fleshed out version of this character. You get this badass intellectual going up against the mysterious macabre Dracula in this movie. Yeah, I think this is just a damn great movie. It's one of the best Dracula movies ever made, in my opinion. And again, if you're going from Lugosi and you're like, well, what's another version of Dracula I should check out? Christopher Lee is that other great version of Dracula that definitely needs to put on your watch list. But last question for everybody here: if you're going to pair Horror of Dracula with another movie, what movie are you guys going to pair it with for your ultimate Horror of Dracula and blank double feature? I see a lot of questioning looks on your faces, so.
Are you there? Are you there, Casey?
Casey?
Casey, are you stuck?
Uh-oh.
I think we lost him. So you go, Sam.
I was about to say I have a double feature. My double feature, I'm gonna pair this with the Hammer version of The Mummy. I really enjoy that. You get to see Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, not necessarily in the iconic roles of Van Helsing and Dracula, but they're still doing what they do best, which is starring in old school monster movies. And so that, I think, yeah, I almost put The Mummy on right after I finished watching Horror of Dracula anyways. So I just think that that's probably the one that I would go with.
Yeah, I'd
go ahead,
definitely go with Curse of the Werewolf, just because that's the only one I've seen. So it's the only, because I definitely do want to check out the others, but and I also want to revisit Curse of the Werewolf just to see if it's as good as I remember. So yeah, so definitely, I think that would be a great pairing.
You know, honestly, I don't know if I have a really good answer, just because, you know, I obviously have mentioned, is I'm not as well versed in this stuff as much as you guys are, to have a good, other than just be like, well, there's more Dracula movies there. You know, I mean, I could just, you know, be Henri to Casey and just say Van Helsing just to piss him off. Um, so honestly, I guess I really I don't know. I mean, I don't have a good answer.
I think
And
any of the Hammer horror, I think you'd be a safe bet. You know.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. My other one would have been the Satanic Rites of Dracula, just because that's where I first learned about Christopher Lee as Dracula. And it was so fun. I mean, I remember buying the DVD pack with my dad, because that's what we do. We'd buy like crappy movie pack, well, like what we called crappy movie packs, and there were always gems in there that I just ended up loving. That my dad would make fun of, and I'd be sitting there like genuinely enjoying them. And and this was one where, you know, like I grew up in a very religious household, so when it opened with the satanic thing, I was told I needed to turn it off, and I was like, okay, you know, and I turned it off, and somehow he still let me actually keep the DVD pack. So I just, you know, pulled it out when
just
after
don't
he'd
watch
gone to
that
bed and watched
particular
it
film,
later.
Sam.
Yeah, so it was
Just don't watch
That's
that
funny.
one.
Which is
that's
also where I
interesting that
found
you-
out about like Night of the Living Dead, Dementia 13, like all these like classics I found
Sure.
through that DVD pack, you know. So I was glad he did not take the whole thing away from me, because there were plenty of gems
Never
there.
underestimate one of those like bargain bin, like 9 movies for $5 kind of thing.
Right.
Yep.
You never know what wonderfulness you're going to get out of there. Because in fact, you know, that's how I have almost the complete collection of the Puppet Master movies, because you know what? I picked up the first 9 for $10. I mean,
Yep.
even just for the first one, granted, you can definitely tell they're almost like they were like dubbed off of VHS tapes, but you know, dang it, if I didn't get, you know, at least a couple good gems out of that one.
Yeah.
That's kind of that there's no bad movies. You know, I think you can find gems out of any movie, at least something, a scene you like, a line of dialogue, you know. So I always try to find something good out of everything.
Yeah,
Definitely.
for sure.
So Casey, now that you're finally back with us here, what's your double feature?
Now that my internet is completely out and I have to use my phone, my double feature is going to be what did you guys say very quickly? Sorry.
I said the Hammer horror Mummy.
And I did Curse of the Werewolf from Hammer.
And they basically said just watch anything.
Yeah. I think you said Van Helsing with.
Yeah, I thought maybe
the
just doing 2004 Van Helsing just to make you mad.
Why did I come back on here? Mine is I'm gonna go Sleepy Hollow. I think with the Christopher Lee, Michael Goff aspect has this kind of very gothic tone to that movie too. Like I think that would be a fun
Peter
double feature.
Cushing, if he was still alive, he should have been Ichabod Crane in that movie.
He would have totally been in there.
He would have been in that movie, yeah.
Yeah, no. If you like, check out Tales from the Crypt from '72 with Peter Cushing. That segment alone is worth it. So
nice.
Will do.
All right, gentlemen. I'm gonna have to have one of you guys at least end the show for me, but we can get into the plugs here. I can still do those from my phone. I think that's possible.
Yeah, do it. Come on, man.
So yeah, that's been our episode on Horror of Dracula. The horror is my internet not working in my entire house, but that's besides the point. If your internet is working in your house, you can subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and on YouTube. Again, if your Wi-Fi is working. If not, I think you can find other ways around it as well.
You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd HQ, and all at Backlot 605. On Facebook, we also have the South Dakota Film Community Group, filmmakers, film enthusiasts, basically anybody who likes movies and whatnot. We like just to talk about movies and have a good time.
Yeah. And you can also join us on Patreon, where we do 4 bonus episodes a month. We are going to be doing one on No Time to Die this week, and there's going to be Halloween Kills, and then what's the last one? I'm forgetting. There's so many good stuff. Dune. That's right, Dune, because I can watch that from my home, and I'm excited about it. Yeah, so join us on Patreon. We always have fun discussions about new release movies and cult classics, as well as just some other fun goodies. You get episodes early and things like that. So definitely check us out on Patreon.
All right. Last but certainly not least, Dom, where can they find you online? Where can they find some of your films online? And anything else you have going on?
Films you can find, there's some on YouTube, there's some on Vimeo. One of these years, I'll get around to actually putting together the website I keep talking about. I don't know if it's going to happen. I am on Facebook.
I know a lady. If you ever need one, I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. I'm on Facebook, which I'm trying to get off of. I'm on Instagram, which I'm trying to get away from. I think I finally shut down Twitter, so. But yeah, the only thing I really want to plug, other than my own stuff, is come see 13 Fanboy on Friday the 22nd or Saturday the 23rd. If you're in the Sioux Falls area, if you're not in the area, go to Deborah Voorhees' Sheer Horror Group. She's got a listing of wherever it's going to be seen, showing in theaters, or get it on VOD, whatever. It's going to be worth it. I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. Ron Sloan, who played Junior in Part 5, everybody thinks he's like this dumbass. The dude pulls off a performance that will surprise everybody. Nice. There was literally one scene between him and Dee Wallace. I had goosebumps. The rest of the crew was like, yeah, it was phenomenal. So check it out.
So what you're saying is they should, if they're in an area where they can see it in the theater, they should go see it in the theater, and at the same time go home and buy it so they have it digitally when they get home.
Yeah. And I do know that there is the DVD Blu-ray release coming. They're estimating within about 2 months. So hopefully after the first of the year, you can get the physical copy. So
cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
any word on a VHS release, Don?
I'm thinking I'm going to talk to Deborah about that, because I was actually designing a poster for the State Theater showing, and it would very easily translate to a VHS box. So I'm thinking I'm going to talk to her about that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Even if you never watch it on VHS, just to have it on VHS because of what it is and everything like that, I think just stands very well for us. I mean, even if you couldn't get it on VHS, I think it'd be like any of the box packaging needs to be put together in a VHS form.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to do with Death Rod, is I have all these VHS tapes from when I was a kid growing up. I wanted to basically just put it on the shittiest VHS tape I could find, just make a box just so I could have my own copy. But yeah, too many other things to work on.
Awesome.
Well, I was going to say, if you ever get to that VHS copy of Death Ride, make two. I'll buy one.
Right,
yeah,
cool.
I'd buy one too, for sure.
That might give me more incentive now to actually do it.
So just, like 4 of them, one for everyone.
All right, I'm good with that.
Yeah. All righty, boys. Well, we're going to end this thing here. I'm going to try my best to do it on my phone. I think I can do it. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Go watch Horror of Dracula. It's on HBO Max. There's plenty of other horror goodies. I think there's some more Hammer horror on there as well. So go definitely check it out.
HBO has an entire section of horror right now, and it's a great curation of horror.
Sweet.
Right. So yeah, again, 13 Fanboy, 22nd, 23rd of October. Go check it out. We'll talk more about that later. You'll hear plenty of about 13 Fanboy at Backlot. So for Brian Mensing, Sam Lenz, thank you, Mr. Dominic Wieneke, for being on the show. We'll talk very soon. This has been Backlot 605. We'll check you out next time on the Backlots of South Dakota.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.